You can carry everything alone and still believe you're not doing enough. That's the paradox of silent endurance. You hold the weight, you push through, you manage what others don't see. People may praise you for being strong, but often they don't notice at all. You've trained them to believe you'll manage, so they stop asking if you're tired. And in the silence of that assumption, the burden grows heavier. There were mornings I woke already weary before the day had begun. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the responsibilities lined up ahead: work, family, promises. Each one felt heavier because I knew I would carry them alone. By the time I sat with my first cup of tea, I was already exhausted, not from the work itself, but from the silence, the knowledge that no one would see how heavy it had become. Stephen's words return often. Everyone leans on me, but I never lean on anyone. I wouldn't even know how. Angela once admitted her own version. I laugh loud enough to hide it. But when I'm alone, I feel the weight pressing harder because no one else knows it's there. 2 lives, 2 stories, the same invisibility. Strength mistaken for silence. The exhaustion of carrying everything alone isn't visible from the outside. You go to work, you keep your promises, you show up on time. But inside, you're shrinking. You feel invisible, not because you don't matter, but because you've hidden the truth so well that no one thinks to ask. That invisibility can feel heavier than the load itself. I remember the day I moved house. The boxes were endless, stacked against the walls like reminders of how much there was to carry. I told myself I could manage, that asking for help would be weakness, or worse, an inconvenience to others. So I lifted alone. The first trips weren't so bad. A stack of books here, a lamp there. But soon I was dragging furniture across the floor, sweat soaking my shirt, arms trembling. I remember trying to angle a cabinet through the doorway, the wood scraping against the frame. My chest burned, my breath came ragged. Then I tried the couch. I lifted one end, the weight pulling at my shoulders, my legs buckling. Halfway through, I nearly dropped it, my vision blurred, the edges of the room narrowing. In that moment, I wasn't proving strength, I was proving fragility. I was seconds from collapse. The neighbor happened to walk by. He saw me straining, set his groceries down, and without hesitation, grabbed the other end. Together we lifted easily what had nearly broken me. The difference was staggering. The couch didn't change, the weight didn't change. What changed was that it was shared. Stephen once confessed, "If I asked, I'm afraid they'd think less of me." Angela admitted, "I joke, I deflect, but sometimes I wish someone would insist on helping the way your neighbor did." Their words remind me of that day, on how close I came to breaking, all because I believed silence was strength. Strength without sharing is fragility disguised. That was the truth I carried out of that house, not the furniture, the lesson. We were never meant to carry life alone. I've seen this truth not just in my own life, but in the way life itself is built. Ants carry more than their own weight, not by straining harder alone, but by carrying together. A single bird may lose its way in migration, but a flock finds direction. Even fire itself only sustains when wood leans into wood, heat shared, not isolated. I once came across the thought that the strongest structures are not the ones standing tall alone, but the ones leaning into each other. An arch exists because each stone presses into the next. Remove one, and the whole structure collapses. That image has followed me for years. Alone, I survive. Together, I breathe. Stephen fears asking will erase him. If I show weakness, he once said, they won't respect me anymore. Angela hides her struggles behind laughter. If they saw my weight, they wouldn't believe I was the free one, she admitted. Their words show how deeply we've confused strength with silence. But silence is not strength. Strength is trust. Trusting another enough to let them in. Trusting yourself enough to admit you need them. I wrote once in my journal, "The heaviest silence is the one no one hears." Each time I read it, I remember that the real cost of carrying everything alone isn't just exhaustion, it's invisibility. No one can see you break if you never let them witness your weight. So I ask myself, again and again, what am I carrying that could breathe easier if someone else held part of it? And why am I so afraid to let them? An ant can carry many times its own weight, but it never carries alone. I've watched them trail across the pavement, a line of small bodies moving in perfect rhythm. One ant lifts a piece of food impossibly larger than itself, staggering for a moment before another joins, then another. Soon the weight that would have crushed one becomes effortless in the company of many. The rhythm of their cooperation is humbling. None of them boast. None of them hesitate. Together, the impossible becomes ordinary. I think of that each time I feel the pull to carry silently. I am reminded that life itself was never designed for isolation. Even the smallest creatures know instinctively what we try so hard to forget. Strength multiplies when shared. Stephen once confessed, "I've been leaned on my whole life, but I've never leaned myself." His silence wears him down more than the duties themselves. Angela, with her brightness, said quietly once, "I laugh so they won't see, but the truth is I wish someone noticed how heavy it feels." Both voices echo the ant's silent wisdom. The weight doesn't need to disappear. It only needs to be carried together. One summer afternoon, I knelt on the ground watching ants carry a fallen piece of bread. I stayed longer than I intended, mesmerized by their persistence. The crumb was heavy, awkward, far larger than they should have managed. But with each ant that joined, the crumb moved steadily forward, not faster, not easier, but possible. I realized then that survival wasn't their triumph. Togetherness was. I walked away carrying a truth I've tried to remember since. We are never meant to carry life alone. Strength without sharing is fragility disguised. Stephen carries this fragility in silence. "I've carried everything so long, I'm afraid if I set it down, I'll fall apart," he admitted. Angela carries it behind laughter. "If they saw me struggle, they wouldn't believe I was free." Their words reveal the same truth. Silence is not strength. It is fear dressed in endurance. I know this ache. There were years I believed asking was weakness, that leaning meant failing. I carried grief, obligation, responsibility alone. Outwardly, I looked steady. Inwardly, I was eroding. What I didn't understand then was that asking isn't weakness. It's opening the door for someone else to matter. The detour is simple, though not easy. To share the weight is to invite belonging. To let someone else carry with you is to tell them, "You matter to me because I trust you with my pain." Silence builds walls. Asking builds bridges. I once wrote in my journal, "Alone, you survive. Together, you breathe." It reminds me that independence may look noble, but interdependence is what makes us human. Trust doesn't erase strength, it multiplies it. So I ask myself, and maybe you've asked too, what would it feel like to be strong enough to trust? To let the weight you carry be seen, not hidden. To allow someone else the gift of holding part of your life. Every load is lighter when someone else feels its weight too. The truth rests with me tonight as I sit in the stillness of my room. I think of moving house nearly collapsing under a cabinet until a neighbour stepped in. I think of the ants carrying together what would have been impossible alone. I think of Stephen, who has been leaned on his whole life but has never leaned. I think of Angela, whose laughter masks the weight she hides. Their stories and mine remind me that strength is never silence. It is trust. The road feels steady beneath me, and for once I don't confuse steadiness with solitude. For years I thought strength meant silence, that to carry quietly was to prove my worth. But strength doesn't multiply in silence. It multiplies in trust. To share the weight is not to weaken, it is to belong. The ache of endurance still returns. There are mornings when I feel the pull to shoulder everything alone, when asking for help feels heavier than the burden itself. There are afternoons when silence seems safer than trust, when it feels easier to break quietly than to risk being seen. But even in those moments, another truth rises. Survival is lonely. Belonging breathes. I remember the small lessons, the couch I couldn't lift until a neighbour insisted, the laughter that masked someone else's weight, the ants carrying what seemed impossible only because they carried it together. These memories remind me that fragility isn't failure. It is the doorway where others enter. The bend ahead lies hidden, but it no longer feels like a road I must travel by myself. I don't need to prove I can carry every load alone. I only need to remember that every weight lightens when it is felt by more than one pair of hands, more than one heart. So I breathe into the turning road and whisper, strength isn't silence. It is trust. And I was never meant to walk this path alone.